Willow Lane had always been known as the peaceful side of town, a place where families thrived, where children played in the streets, and where everyone knew everyone. But there was one house on the far edge of the lane, nestled behind tall, gnarled trees, that no one talked about. The neighbors said it was cursed, that anyone who dared live there would be driven mad. For years, it remained empty, until one unsuspecting family, the Anders, moved in, hoping to make a fresh start. They had no idea of the horrors waiting within its walls. The Anders family, Emma, her husband, Daniel, and their 2 children, Max and Lily, had always dreamed of a life in the country. City life had taken a toll, and Willow Lane seemed like the perfect escape. Emma fell in love with the old house the moment she saw it, charmed by its Victorian architecture and large, secluded yard. She couldn't understand why it had been on the market for so long, or why the agent seemed eager to finalize the sale as quickly as possible. They moved in on a warm spring morning, laughing, unpacking, dreaming of the life they would build together. But within days, they'd discover that something sinister lingered, watching from the shadows. At first, it was the little things, odd enough to be noticed, but not alarming. Emma would catch a cold draft in the hallway, even though the windows were closed. The mirrors seemed to fog up, displaying strange handprints, and at night, they would hear faint creaks, as if someone was walking slowly through the house. But the real trouble began when Max, their youngest, started talking about a woman he called the Lady in White. Max was only 5, full of imagination, so Emma dismissed it as harmless. But as the nights passed, Max's stories grew more specific. "She stands by the window, Mommy," he'd say, his eyes wide and unblinking. "She's watching us." Emma tried to ignore it, tried to laugh it off, but her nerves were beginning to fray. It wasn't long before she started seeing things herself. Late one night, while lying in bed, she heard a faint whisper right next to her ear, a low, mournful voice murmuring her name. She sat up, her heart racing, but the room was empty. Daniel brushed it off as a bad dream, but Emma knew what she'd heard. She began to notice shadows where there shouldn't be any. She would find doors open that she'd closed, and objects moved to places she hadn't left them. Max grew quieter, more distant, often staring out the window at nothing. It felt as though something dark was creeping into their lives. Determined to put her fears to rest, Emma decided to explore the attic, a place she'd avoided since they moved in. Armed with a flashlight, she climbed the narrow staircase and pushed open the creaking door. The air was thick, and the smell of mildew and decay was overpowering. As she swept the light across the room, her eyes landed on something strange, an old, weathered trunk sitting in the corner, covered in dust. She knelt beside it, hands trembling, and slowly opened the lid. Inside were crumbling letters, photographs, and a diary belonging to a woman named Clara Townsend, who had once lived in the house. Flipping through the brittle pages, Emma read of Clara's tragic life, her descent into madness, and her obsession with escaping the house, though she felt she never could. The final entry read, "I am trapped here. My soul will never leave." After Emma's discovery, Max's behavior grew stranger. He began talking to someone in his room, laughing and whispering secrets. When Emma asked him who he was talking to, he replied, "My friend Clara. She says she wants me to stay with her." That night, Emma stayed up, sitting outside Max's room. Around midnight, she heard the soft, lilting melody of a lullaby coming from inside. The tune was faint but unmistakable, and it sent chills down her spine. She burst into the room, but Max was alone, fast asleep. The next morning, Max wouldn't meet her eyes. "Clara says you shouldn't come into my room at night, Mommy," he said flatly. It makes her angry. Emma's anxiety reached a fever pitch. Shadows flitted at the edges of her vision, and the whispers grew louder. She tried to tell Daniel, but he was dismissive, blaming the stress of the move. But when Lily, their younger daughter, began talking about seeing the Lady in White too, Daniel's skepticism began to waver. Emma felt trapped, desperate, and soon she became obsessed with Clara's diary. reading it over and over, trying to understand the spirit that haunted her home. She discovered that Clara had lost her own children under tragic circumstances and had been so devastated that she vowed no one else would ever take her place in the house. Emma realized that Clara wasn't just haunting them. She was trying to possess them, to reclaim the family she'd lost. One stormy night, Emma woke to the sound of soft crying. She got out of bed, drawn to the noise, which seemed to come from the basement. With each step, the crying grew louder and more anguished. At the bottom of the stairs, she saw her children standing in the darkness, their faces pale, their eyes glazed. They stared at her, emotionless, and began to whisper in unison, "She's here. She's coming for you." Suddenly, the room went cold, and Emma felt an invisible force wrap around her, choking her, pulling her down. She struggled, gasping for breath, and in her final moments of consciousness, she saw the faint outline of Clara's face, twisted in a malevolent smile. Emma awoke on the basement floor, shaken and disoriented. She knew they had to leave the house, that Clara's spirit would never let them go if they stayed. She ran to wake Daniel and gathered the children, frantically packing their belongings. As they tried to leave, the doors slammed shut, the windows rattled, and the lights flickered on and off. It was as though the house itself had come alive, determined to keep them there. With one final burst of strength, Emma threw open the front door, and they fled into the night, never looking back. They left everything behind, abandoning Willow Lane for good. In the years that followed, the Anders family spoke little of what happened. They never returned to the town, and the house on Willow Lane was left empty once more. But the whispers continued, and on quiet nights, the neighbours would hear the faint sound of a lullaby drifting from the windows, a sign that Clara's restless spirit was still there, waiting for her next family to take her place. To this day, they say no one should stay too long on Willow Lane, for fear of hearing Clara's voice, calling them to join her, forever. So, if you ever find yourself on Willow Lane, remember this story. Remember that some homes don't let go of their past, and some spirits never find peace. And if you hear a lullaby, don't look back, because once Clara sees you, she'll never let you go. Ravenmoor Manor was the kind of place people only spoke about in hushed tones. It had been abandoned for years, perched at the edge of a forgotten town, its grand Gothic architecture crumbling and overtaken by ivy. Stories circulated about the place, of strange happenings, eerie sightings, and the ghostly presence that was said to stalk the manor's halls. No one dared to step inside, until one group of young thrill-seekers decided to spend the night there, seeking to uncover the truth. But what they found was beyond their worst nightmares. The manor had once been the home of the Ravenswood family, an affluent but mysterious family that had disappeared under strange circumstances nearly a century ago. The town's whispers hinted at curses, tragic deaths, and the dark arts, but no one knew for sure. When the dare was set for the young group, Elena, Mark, Tom, and Sophie, they jumped at the chance to spend the night, armed with flashlights, cameras, and a sense of adventure. They laughed off the stories as superstition, unaware that the shadows had already begun to stir, watching, waiting. The air was thick as they entered, each step echoing through the empty halls. Dust clung to the dark wood, and cobwebs veiled the chandeliers. The deeper they went, the more the atmosphere seemed to close in, like unseen eyes tracking their every move. Elena noticed faint scratches on the walls, words barely visible in the dim light. "Do not enter. Leave." And the name Lillian, repeated over and over. As she ran her fingers over the jagged letters, a shiver ran down her spine, and she felt as though something were breathing down her neck. Hours passed, and strange things began to happen. The sounds of footsteps echoed above them, though the floorboards were thick with dust, untouched by human feet for years. They heard whispers coming from the rooms they hadn't entered yet, voices that sounded like a woman's, calling a name, Lillian, over and over, growing more insistent. The group was nervous, but decided to press on, determined to debunk the so-called haunting and prove their bravery. But every corner they turned seemed darker, colder, as though the manor itself wanted them lost. Finally, they reached what the townspeople called the mirror room. It was a grand chamber lined with antique mirrors, each one cracked, dusty, yet reflecting the group's faces in strange, distorted ways. Eleanor stepped forward, entranced by a large mirror in the center that had an unusual, dark aura. As she stared, the air around her grew colder, and her reflection changed. Her eyes turned hollow, her skin pale, her mouth twisted into a sinister grin. She screamed and stumbled back, breaking her gaze, but the image in the mirror lingered for a moment longer, as if it had a mind of its own. Mark, who had been filming the whole time, decided to check his footage. When he played it back, the group went pale. Behind them, in the darkness, a figure could be seen, a woman in an old-fashioned dress, her face obscured, standing still and watching them from the shadows. But in the footage, every time they looked back, she disappeared, only to reappear a little closer each time. Panic set in. "We need to leave," Sophie whispered, clutching Mark's arm. But the doors, which had been left open, were now locked tight, as though the manor had decided they would stay. Their night became a nightmare. They split up in a desperate search for a way out, but as they wandered, the halls seemed to change around them, leading them in circles. Tom heard a soft crying sound and followed it, finding a small, dark room where a woman's ghostly form was crouched, weeping. Her face lifted to reveal hollow, black eyes, and she whispered, "Lillian, come back to me." He stumbled back, tripping and crawling out, but the shadow followed him, slowly, deliberately, as if savoring his fear. In a last act of desperation, Elena remembered the name scratched into the walls. She called out, "Lillian, if you're here, we mean you no harm." The air grew thick, heavy, and for a moment, everything fell silent. Then, a faint voice replied, "Leave, while you can." The group regrouped, and with renewed strength, forced the doors open, bursting into the cold night air. As they looked back, they saw her, Lillian's spirit, standing in the window, her hollow eyes watching as they fled. The group returned to town, but none spoke of what happened in Ravenmoor Manor. Their cameras and footage captured things they couldn't explain, but they left the tapes untouched, too afraid to relive that night. And to this day, Ravenmoor Manor stands silent, waiting for the next visitor foolish enough to disturb its shadows. They say Lillian is still there, bound to the manor by a dark force, calling for the daughter she lost, ready to trap anyone who dares enter. Some places should remain forgotten, and some spirits never rest. So if you ever find yourself near Ravenmoor Manor, listen closely. You might just hear her calling, "Lillian." And if you do, don't turn back, because once she sees you, you may never escape. Welcome, brave listeners, to EerieTales, where we explore stories that linger at the edges of reality and beyond. Tonight, we take you to the abandoned halls of a forgotten asylum, hidden deep within the woods, a place haunted by its own dark history. Our story follows Mark, an urban explorer with a taste for the supernatural, who soon discovers that some places are better left untouched. This is the tale of the Forgotten Asylum. The asylum, built over a century ago, was once a place of hope, a refuge for those struggling with mental illness. But over time, conditions deteriorated, and stories of strange experiments and mysterious deaths began to surface. Patients claimed to hear voices, see shadows moving in the corners, and feel as though they were never truly alone. After a series of unexplained deaths, the asylum was abruptly shut down and its patients vanished from history, leaving only rumors of souls trapped within its walls. Enter Mark, a thrill seeker and urban explorer drawn to haunted sites and legends of the paranormal. He's heard whispers of the asylum's dark past, and despite the warnings, he's determined to uncover the truth for himself. Armed with a flashlight, camera, and enough skepticism to keep him moving forward, Mark sets out for the asylum on a cold, moonlit night. As he steps through the broken gates, he feels a chill, a faint, cold warning that this place is not like the others he's explored. The asylum looms before him, its windows shattered, its walls covered in vines and grime. Mark pushes open the heavy front doors, which creak as though reluctant to let him in. Inside, the air is thick with dust and the smell of decay. Old, rusted hospital beds are scattered in the hallways, and faded patient records litter the floor. Mark pulls out his camera, documenting every eerie detail, his footsteps echoing down the empty corridors. Mark finds an old office and begins sifting through files, discovering disturbing details about the asylum's patients. Many were committed for reasons that now seem trivial: depression, anxiety, or even rebellious behavior. The walls around him are covered in cryptic messages scratched into the paint. They're watching, "I can't escape," and "Help me." The air grows colder, and Mark's breath fogs in the dim light. He feels a prickle of fear as if unseen eyes are watching his every move. As Mark continues exploring, he hears faint whispers echoing through the halls. He pauses, straining to listen, but the voices stop as suddenly as they began. Dismissing it as his imagination, he moves on, only to catch a glimpse of a shadow darting across the hallway ahead. Heart pounding, he turns his flashlight toward the shadow, but finds nothing there. Suddenly, a door slams shut behind him, and Mark realizes he may not be alone in the asylum after all. Midnight is fast approaching, and Mark's sense of dread grows stronger. He finds himself drawn to the basement where the most troubled patients were kept. The walls here are damp, the air thick with an unearthly chill. As he descends, he begins to see ghostly figures moving in the darkness, patients dressed in tattered hospital gowns, their faces pale and eyes hollow. They seem lost, wandering aimlessly, as though trapped in an endless loop of suffering. As he explores deeper, Mark's flashlight flickers, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The ghostly figures become more defined, their faces twisted in fear and anguish. One spirit reaches out to him, whispering, "You shouldn't be here." Mark backs away, his breath quickening, but finds himself cornered by the apparitions. Each one seems to be reenacting their final moments, as if they're reliving the horror that ended their lives. Desperate to escape, Mark stumbles backward, feeling the walls close in around him. Mark realizes he needs to leave, but every corridor seems to lead him deeper into the asylum. The whispers grow louder, a cacophony of voices crying out for help, their pleas echoing through his mind. Just when he thinks he's trapped, he remembers an old map he saw in the office. Racing back, he grabs it, using it to navigate through the twisted maze of hallways. As he nears the exit, he hears footsteps following him, heavy, dragging steps that grow closer with every second. With his heart pounding, Mark breaks into a sprint. The footsteps close behind. He reaches the front doors and bursts outside, collapsing onto the ground as he gasps for air. The asylum looms behind him, silent once more. But as he turns to look back, he sees a figure standing in the window, watching him leave. Mark quickly gathers his things, vowing never to return. The forgotten asylum stands empty, its walls hiding secrets and memories too dark to reveal. Some say the spirits are waiting for anyone brave enough to join them within its haunted halls. Would you dare explore the forgotten asylum, knowing what lingers inside? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more chilling stories from EerieTales. Some places are designed to guide people to safety, to light the way in the dark. But some, like the Hawthorne Bay Lighthouse, harbour secrets best left hidden. Built in the 1800s on a remote cliffside, the lighthouse once saved countless lives. But after a tragic accident that claimed the life of its keeper, Captain Elias Finch, it was abandoned, left to withstand the storms and time alone. Decades later, rumours grew of strange lights, eerie sounds, and ghostly figures haunting its grounds. Tonight, we uncover the story of three friends who ventured to the lighthouse, hoping to discover the truth, and vanished without a trace. Captain Elias Finch was known as a kind man, but he was fiercely protective of the lighthouse. He often spoke of a treasure hidden on the island, though many assumed it was just a sailor's tale. One night during a violent storm, Captain Finch was found dead at the base of the cliff, under circumstances that remain a mystery. The lighthouse was abandoned, and over the years, those who dared to visit claimed to see his figure standing at the top, looking out over the dark waves. Three thrill-seeking friends, Sarah, Mike, and Liam, heard the stories and couldn't resist the challenge. They arrived at the cliffside, excited and equipped with flashlights and recording devices. As they approached the crumbling lighthouse, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks filled the air. The structure was daunting, rising like a grim sentinel against the darkening sky. Each step closer felt heavier, but they laughed it off, eager to document their adventure. The first strange occurrence came as they entered the main chamber. The air was thick with a musty, salty odour, and as they shone their lights around, they noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols they couldn't decipher, carved deeply into the stone. Mike joked about pirate curses, but Sarah felt a cold breeze brush past her, sending a chill down her spine. Then they heard it, a faint, hollow voice echoing from the top of the tower, calling out, "Leave!" They laughed nervously, attributing it to the wind, but Liam decided to climb the staircase, flashlight in hand, taunting the ghost of Captain Finch to show himself. As they climbed, the air grew colder, and the structure creaked ominously with every step. When they reached the top, they saw him, a shadowy figure standing by the lens, his back turned to them. His old-fashioned coat billowed slightly, though there was no wind inside. Mike shouted, hoping for a reaction, but the figure remained still. Then, it slowly turned, revealing hollow dark eyes and a face twisted in a silent scream. Sarah gasped, and in an instant, the figure vanished. Their camera glitched, and the lens cracked, leaving them in near darkness. Panicked but intrigued, they decided to search the basement, hoping to uncover the treasure Captain Finch had spoken of. The door was heavy and creaked open to reveal a damp, pitch-black room lined with shelves. The smell of salt and decay was overwhelming. As they searched, they found an old, rusted chest. Inside were journals, coins, and a pocket watch. But one journal stood out. Its pages were filled with frenzied handwriting, detailing the captain's final days, his fear of a dark presence that haunted the lighthouse, and his belief that the treasure was cursed. Just as they prepared to leave, they heard footsteps coming down the staircase, slow and deliberate. The air felt dense, pressing against them as they huddled together, trembling. The door suddenly slammed shut, trapping them in the cold darkness. They heard the captain's voice, whispering, "You shouldn't have come." The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they felt an icy grip on their shoulders. In the dim light, they saw a shadow looming over them, and the face of Captain Finch appeared once more, his eyes empty and hollow. Terrified, they tried to break open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Finally, with a burst of strength, Mike managed to force the door open, and they stumbled out into the night, gasping for breath. But as they looked back, they saw the captain standing in the doorway, his hand raised as if beckoning them back. They ran down the cliffside path, vowing never to return. The lighthouse stood silent, its dark windows watching, waiting, and the friends knew that Captain Finch's warning was real. To this day, no one else has dared to visit Hawthorne Bay Lighthouse. Thank you for joining us on EerieTales. Some places, like the Hawthorne Bay Lighthouse, are best left in the dark, and some spirits never truly leave. If you ever find yourself near an abandoned lighthouse, remember, some secrets are meant to stay hidden. Ravenswood Manor, an estate where echoes of the past linger and secrets are buried in shadow. Once a symbol of wealth and status, it is now a place that no one dares to enter. Tonight, we uncover the dark history of Ravenswood Manor and the chilling tales that left this grand house abandoned, cursed and haunted by those who refused to leave. Built in the late 1800s by the Ravenswood family, the manor was a grand symbol of prestige. The Ravenswoods were known for their wealth, elegance, and influence in high society. They hosted lavish parties, attended by the most distinguished guests. But behind the grandeur, whispers of scandal and tragedy followed them. The manor's decline began with the sudden and mysterious deaths of family members, one after another. Illness, accidents, disappearances. It seemed as if a dark curse had befallen the Ravenswood lineage. By the 1930s, only one member remained, the last heir, a recluse who eventually vanished without a trace, leaving the manor to decay. With the family gone, the manor was left to the elements, slowly crumbling and abandoned. Local townsfolk began to avoid the grounds, claiming to hear whispers in the night and seeing shadowy figures moving through the darkened hallways. Some reported ghostly lights flickering in the windows, while others swore they could hear faint music from the ballroom, as if the Ravenswoods' lavish parties had never ended. Legends spread of cursed rooms, each with its own ghostly inhabitant. The townsfolk came to believe that the Ravenswood family hadn't left at all. They had simply crossed into another realm, bound to the manor they called home. In the decades that followed, Ravenswood Manor became a favourite spot for thrill seekers and those curious about the paranormal. Many entered, but few returned without tales of terror. One such group, a handful of teenagers, dared to explore the manor late one night. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they stepped into the grand foyer, only to find the air thick with a sense of dread. Their flashlights flickered, and strange noises echoed through the halls. Footsteps that didn't belong to any of them, whispers that seemed to come from the walls, and doors creaking open on their own. One by one, they encountered shadowy figures slipping through doorways, disappearing before they could fully comprehend what they were seeing. One of the teenagers, Emily, wandered into the ballroom, drawn by the faint sound of music. As she stepped into the room, she froze, seeing ghostly figures dressed in vintage attire, waltzing to a melody that seemed to play from nowhere. Their faces were pale, their expressions devoid of life, yet they moved gracefully, as if trapped in an endless dance. When Emily tried to speak, the figures turned, their eyes meeting hers, eyes empty but filled with sorrow. In that moment, she felt a chill so deep it nearly stopped her heart. She fled, but the memory of their faces haunted her long after she left Ravenswood. One of the most haunted rooms in Ravenswood is the master bedroom. Legend says that the last Ravenswood heir spent his final days here, speaking to shadows and writing cryptic messages on the walls. Those brave enough to enter report seeing a dark figure in the mirror, a figure that moves when they don't, watching them with a hollow gaze. One visitor claimed that when she looked into the mirror, the figure stepped out, reaching toward her with long, skeletal fingers before vanishing into the darkness. She left the manor in terror, swearing never to return. The basement of Ravenswood Manor holds the darkest secret of all. Known as the Crypt, this room is said to be where the Ravenswood family practiced strange rituals, hoping to break the curse that plagued them. Visitors have reported hearing whispers behind the locked door, voices speaking in languages they didn't understand. A few brave souls managed to enter, only to describe a feeling of overwhelming dread, as if they were being watched from every corner. One man recounted hearing a low growl, feeling hot breath on his neck before he fled the manor, leaving his flashlight behind. No one has dared enter the crypt since. Today, Ravenswood Manor stands as a reminder of the dangers of meddling with forces beyond our understanding. Some say the ghosts are still waiting for visitors to uncover the secrets they left behind. Others believe the house itself is alive, feeding off the fear of those who enter. If you ever find yourself near Ravenswood Manor, remember this: some doors are best left closed, and some secrets are meant to stay buried. If this story sent chills down your spine, subscribe to EerieTales for more haunted legends and tales of the unknown. But beware, Ravenswood Manor is not the only place where ghosts refuse to rest. Welcome, dear listeners, to EerieTales, where we journey into the shadows of history, uncovering stories that linger beyond the grave. Tonight, we take you to Ravenwood Manor, an abandoned mansion shrouded in mystery and sorrow. Built in the 1800s by the wealthy Ashford family, Ravenwood has remained empty since the night the family vanished without a trace. Our story follows Sarah, a young student intrigued by the architecture and the ghostly secrets of Ravenwood Manor. This is the curse of Ravenwood Manor. Perched on the edge of a dense forest, Ravenwood Manor looms over the town below. The mansion, with its tall windows and ivy-covered walls, seems frozen in time. Once the pride of the Ashford family, Ravenwood is now a relic of the past, its grandeur overshadowed by a curse that locals say still lingers within its walls. Sarah, an architecture student drawn to forgotten places, arrives at the mansion, determined to explore its secrets. Sarah has always been fascinated by old buildings, especially ones with dark histories. She's heard the rumors about Ravenwood, the whispers of ghostly sightings and strange sounds, but she's too intrigued to stay away. Armed with her camera, notebook and flashlight, she steps through the mansion's heavy doors, feeling an eerie chill as she crosses the threshold. As she moves through the grand foyer, Sarah is struck by the decaying beauty of the mansion. The walls are adorned with faded portraits of the Ashford family, their eyes seeming to follow her as she passes. Dust covers every surface, and the air is thick with the scent of mildew and something else. Something she can't quite identify. She finds relics of the past, ornate furniture, dusty books, and a grand piano with keys yellowed by age. Each room she explores seems to tell its own story of wealth and tragedy. Sarah begins to find strange markings on the walls, symbols etched into the wood, almost as if they're part of a ritual. She also notices letters scattered on a desk, hinting at trouble within the Ashford family. Arguments about money, mysterious illnesses, and mentions of keeping the darkness at bay. As she reads, she hears a faint whisper, like someone calling her name. She turns, but there's no one there, only shadows dancing in the dim light. Suddenly, the air grows colder, and Sarah feels a shiver down her spine. Her vision blurs, and she finds herself transported back in time, standing in the very same foyer. But the mansion is alive and bustling. She sees the Ashford family gathered, looking tense and fearful as thunder rumbles in the distance. She realizes she's witnessing a memory, a vision of the night the family vanished. Before she can make sense of it, the vision fades, leaving her back in the decayed, empty room. Determined to uncover more, Sarah ventures deeper into the mansion. In a dusty hallway, she catches glimpses of shadowy figures: a woman in a long dress, a child holding a doll, a man pacing with worry etched on his face. They seem unaware of her presence, locked in their own endless loop of sorrow. As she watches, one of the spirits turns and looks directly at her, his eyes hollow, yet filled with a plea for help. Sarah's heart races as she realizes the spirits are not just memories. They're aware of her, and they're reaching out. Piecing together the clues, Sarah learns that the Ashford family was involved in dark rituals, desperate to protect their fortune and ensure their legacy. But something went horribly wrong, and they unleashed a curse that bound them to the mansion for eternity. The final journal entry she finds reads, "The darkness cannot be contained. It seeks new souls." Chills run down her spine as she realizes the spirits want her to break the curse, or join them forever. As Sarah tries to leave, the doors slam shut, trapping her inside. The spirits appear around her, their faces twisted in anguish, pleading for release. Desperate, Sarah remembers the symbols she saw earlier, markings that might be part of a ritual to break the curse. Racing against time, she retraces her steps, carving the symbols into the walls where they've faded, her hands shaking as the mansion seems to come alive around her, groaning and creaking as if resisting her efforts. With one final symbol, the air around her grows silent. The spirits gather, their faces softening as they begin to fade, their sorrow lifting at last. The mansion grows darker, as if the very life has drained from it. Sarah stumbles out the door, gasping for air, as Ravenwood Manor stands silent behind her, finally at peace. Ravenwood Manor remains a haunting reminder of the Ashfords' tragic past, but the curse has finally been lifted. Or has it? Some say the spirits still linger, waiting for someone to truly understand their story. Would you dare explore Ravenwood Manor and risk uncovering its secrets? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more haunted tales on EerieTales. Hidden in the dense forests of North Carolina, far from bustling cities and well-trodden paths, lies a peculiar patch of land that defies nature and explanation. This 40-foot barren circle, known as the Devil's Tramping Ground, has been the subject of chilling legends, scientific inquiries, and local superstition for over 3 centuries. Within this enigmatic ring, no grass grows, no plants take root, and no animals dare to cross its threshold. The eerie desolation of the circle has puzzled scientists and terrified adventurers, as stories of ghostly figures and unexplained phenomena continue to emerge. What is it about this mysterious place that makes it so uninviting, so unnatural? Some say it is the work of the devil himself, while others believe it to be a place where the veil between worlds is dangerously thin. The Devil's Tramping Ground is unlike any other clearing you might find in a forest. While the surrounding woods are vibrant with greenery and teeming with life, this circle remains stubbornly barren. Attempts to plant grass or flowers within the circle have all failed, as if the ground itself rejects life. Soil tests have been conducted by curious scientists over the years, but no definitive explanation has been found. The soil is not toxic, nor is it chemically unusual, yet its stubborn refusal to host any form of life remains an unsolved mystery. Even the trees that line the circle seem to lean away from it, their branches twisting as though recoiling from some unseen force. Local hunters and hikers have noted that animals avoid the area entirely, never venturing near the lifeless circle, as if driven by instinct to stay away. This strange, empty patch of earth has been here for as long as anyone can remember, untouched by the passage of time. The Devil's Tramping Ground is not only home to chilling legends, but also strange and unexplainable occurrences. Visitors often speak of an unnatural silence that falls over the area, even during the day. The usual sounds of rustling leaves, chirping birds, and scurrying animals fade away as one approaches the circle, replaced by an almost oppressive stillness. Compasses malfunction, spinning wildly, and some people report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, as though they are being watched by an unseen presence. Skeptics have tried to dismiss these phenomena as tricks of the mind, yet the consistency of these accounts leaves even the most logical observers questioning what lies at the heart of this mystery. Over the years, various theories have been proposed to explain the Devil's Tramping Ground. Some believe it is the site of an ancient Native American burial ground, its sacred energy warding off life. Others suggest it may be a natural geological anomaly, perhaps caused by a meteor strike or underground radiation. More skeptical minds argue that the circle's barren state is due to a chemical imbalance in the soil, or perhaps years of erosion from heavy foot traffic by curious visitors. Yet, none of these theories fully account for the eerie phenomena reported at the site. The strange lights, the ghostly whispers, and the inexplicable sense of dread that hangs in the air. For those who have ventured into the circle and returned, there remains an unshakable feeling that something unearthly lingers in this place, defying all attempts at explanation. Despite its ominous reputation, the Devil's Tramping Ground continues to attract visitors from around the world. Paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and skeptics alike have all been drawn to this mysterious site, hoping to uncover its secrets. Some leave with nothing more than photographs and stories of an unsettling silence. Others come away with experiences they can't explain. Campfires that extinguish themselves, shadows that seem to move against the light, and the undeniable feeling that they are not alone. Whether it is a geological curiosity, a remnant of an ancient past, or the playground of a sinister force, the Devil's Tramping Ground remains one of North Carolina's most enduring mysteries. To this day, the Devil's Tramping Ground stands as a testament to the power of the unknown. It is a place where science and superstition collide, leaving behind more questions than answers. Some see it as a reminder of forces beyond human comprehension, while others view it as an intriguing puzzle yet to be solved. Whatever your beliefs, one thing is certain. Those who visit this enigmatic circle rarely leave unchanged. So, would you dare to step into the Devil's Tramping Ground? Or will you keep a safe distance, leaving its mysteries undisturbed? Tucked away in the rural corners of Ohio lies a ghost town with a name that sends shivers down the spine: Helltown. Officially known as Boston Township, this once thriving settlement has become a symbol of eerie abandonment and chilling folklore. The town earned its sinister nickname in the 1970s after the federal government ordered the evacuation of residents to make way for a national park, a project that never came to fruition. What remains today are desolate homes, empty streets, and a looming sense of unease. But the story doesn't end there. Over the years, Helltown has become the subject of countless ghost stories, legends of satanic rituals, and unexplained phenomena. What draws people to this desolate place? And more importantly, what keeps them up at night after they leave? Long before it became known as Helltown, Boston Township was a quiet, unassuming village founded in the early 1800s. Settlers built a tight-knit community, surrounded by Ohio's dense forests and rolling hills. The town flourished for over a century, but everything changed in the 1970s when the federal government stepped in. Under the guise of expanding the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, officials used eminent domain to force residents to leave their homes. Families who had lived there for generations were uprooted almost overnight. Houses were boarded up and plans for the park stalled, leaving the town in a state of eerie suspension. Abandoned homes became overgrown with weeds, streets fell silent, and what was once a peaceful village began to take on a far darker reputation. As the years passed, Helltown transformed from a forgotten community into a hotspot for urban legends. Stories of satanic rituals in the woods began to circulate, with rumors of cult activity drawing the curious and the brave. It's said that strange symbols can still be found carved into the trees, and some claim to hear chants echoing through the forest at night. The infamous End of the World Road, a winding, narrow path that abruptly stops at a sheer drop, became a centerpiece of these tales, with many swearing it's a place of spiritual unease. Other legends include sightings of ghostly figures wandering the deserted streets and phantom lights moving through the abandoned church. Over time, these stories have merged into a tapestry of terror, cementing Helltown as one of Ohio's most haunted places. Helltown's reputation as a supernatural hotspot has attracted countless paranormal investigators over the years, each leaving with more questions than answers. Some report capturing eerie voices on audio equipment, while others describe unexplainable cold spots and feelings of being watched. One particularly chilling account involves a group of explorers who claimed their flashlight beams dimmed as they approached an abandoned building, only to hear footsteps following them as they fled. Residents from nearby towns often speak of strange lights appearing in the woods, moving in erratic patterns as if controlled by an unseen force. Even skeptics admit that the oppressive atmosphere of Helltown is hard to ignore. Whether it's the silence that blankets the town or the darkened windows of its crumbling homes, there's something undeniably unsettling about this place. But how much of Helltown's reputation is based on fact, and how much is fiction? Some of the legends can be traced back to misunderstandings or exaggerated tales. The End of the World Road, for instance, is simply an abrupt end to an unfinished path, though its eerie setting has made it a focal point for ghost stories. As for the supposed satanic rituals, local historians suggest that these rumours were likely fueled by the town's abandoned state and the imagination of thrill-seekers. However, even the most rational explanations can't account for the consistent reports of paranormal activity. It's this blend of verifiable history and unexplainable events that makes Helltown such a fascinating and terrifying place. Whether you believe in the supernatural or see Helltown as a relic of governmental neglect, one thing is certain: this abandoned village continues to capture the imagination of all who hear its story. The mix of desolation, folklore, and eerie beauty makes it a place unlike any other. Helltown stands as a reminder of how quickly the familiar can become the unknown, and how history and legend often collide in the most haunting of ways. Would you dare to visit Helltown, or would its chilling reputation keep you far away? Welcome back, brave souls, to another night of bone-chilling tales here on EerieTales. Tonight, we don't just tell a story, we invite you into a legend, one that's buried deep within the dark woods of Eldridge Hollow, where the shadows are thick and the trees whisper secrets in the dead of night. Eldridge Hollow is more than just an old, forgotten town. For generations, people have whispered about its cursed land, a place where the veil between the living and the dead is almost transparent. Some call it a portal, others say it's a prison, but one thing is clear: the forest surrounding it, known as the Whispering Woods, is haunted. Local lore says that every few decades during the blood moon, the trees themselves awaken, speaking to those brave or foolish enough to listen. And if you're one of the chosen, the forest will call you by name, drawing you deeper, whispering secrets that demand to be uncovered. Tonight, the forest has chosen its next soul. Our protagonist, Alex, grew up in Eldridge Hollow, listening to his grandmother's stories of the Whispering Woods. But these weren't just stories, they were warnings. Warnings about a pact forged by his ancestors long ago. One that kept the spirits at bay, but bound his family to the forest forever. And tonight, under the eerie glow of the blood moon, Alex can no longer ignore the call. He hears his name carried on the wind, faint at first, like a murmur in the distance, then clearer, insistent. "Alex, come to us." The voice is old, filled with sorrow, and yet somehow familiar. With a lantern in hand and his heart pounding, Alex steps into the forest, knowing that whatever lies ahead could change his life and the lives of his descendants forever. As Alex treads deeper, the forest closes around him, swallowing the light. The path is treacherous, overgrown with roots that seem to twist and reach for him. Shadows flicker in the corner of his eye, figures he thinks he recognizes but can't quite make out. And then he sees it. An old stone marker, covered in moss, carved with strange symbols. It's a boundary, marking the start of the Whispering Woods. The whispers grow louder, layering over one another until they become a chorus. A cacophony of souls lost and bound. They speak of betrayal, sacrifice, and a curse that has only grown stronger with each generation. As he walks, fragments of his ancestors' lives flash before him. Brief, ghostly glimpses of men and women who, like him, answered the forest's call but never truly returned. In the heart of the woods stands a crumbling chapel, hidden by overgrown ivy and shrouded in fog. It's a relic from another time, its doors sagging and its windows shattered. Inside, the air is thick, charged with an energy that feels almost alive. Candles, long extinguished, sit on the altar, their wax dripping like tears. Around them are offerings left by past generations, worn photographs, locks of hair, handwritten notes, all tributes to the spirits of the forest. Alex steps inside, feeling the weight of his family's history pressing down on him. The whispers converge here, filling the room with a palpable sense of sorrow and urgency. The voice he heard before grows louder, guiding him to an ancient trapdoor hidden beneath the altar. Trembling, he pries it open, revealing a dark staircase leading down. Alex descends into the crypt, the air growing colder with each step. Here, deep beneath the earth, lie the remains of his ancestors, guardians of the Pact. Their coffins are lined along the walls, each marked with a name and a symbol of the Pact. In the center of the room stands a stone table, and on it, an old leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. He opens the journal, reading the words of his great-great-grandfather, the first to enter the Pact. The journal tells of a time when the spirits grew restless, threatening to consume the town in darkness. To protect Eldridge Hollow, Alex's ancestor made a deal with the spirits. In exchange for peace, each generation of his family would return to the woods and renew the Pact, keeping the spirits bound to the forest. Now, with the blood moon at its peak, Alex realizes why he was called here. The Pact must be renewed tonight, or the spirits will be free to roam, seeking vengeance on the town. But as he reads further, he discovers something his ancestors never told him. Breaking the Pact could set his family's spirits free from their eternal bondage, but it would unleash the wrath of the Whispering Woods upon Eldridge Hollow. The voices of his ancestors rise around him, each pleading for him to make a different choice. Some beg him to renew the Pact and save the town, while others cry out for release, desperate to finally rest. Alex stands frozen, the weight of his decision crushing him. As he struggles with his choice, the spirits begin to manifest around him. They are shadowy figures, faces blurred, yet each exudes a presence he recognizes. His great-grandmother steps forward, her eyes filled with sorrow. She reaches out, her touch cold as ice, and tells him that she too once faced this choice, but chose to renew the Pact to protect her family and the town. But, she warns, each renewal only strengthens the spirit's hold over the family. Then another figure steps forward, his great-uncle, who broke from tradition and tried to escape the town. He tells Alex that breaking the Pact could finally free their souls, but would come at a cost the town could never bear. As the spirits close in around him, Alex realizes he has two choices: renew the Pact, keeping the town safe, but condemning his family to servitude in the forest, or break the Pact, risking the wrath of the spirits, but possibly freeing his ancestors from their curse. He looks around, hearing the whispers of his ancestors, each trying to sway him. He feels the weight of generations on his shoulders. With a final look at the faces of his family, he steels himself, knowing that whatever he chooses will echo through time. Alex's choice remains unknown, for this story is as much about the past as it is about the present. What would you do, dear viewer, if you were bound to a curse that could either protect or destroy? Leave your thoughts below, And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for another tale from the eerie edges of reality. Until then, keep listening to the whispers if you dare. It's a dark, moonless night. The road ahead stretches endlessly, flanked by shadowy trees and illuminated only by your car's headlights. Suddenly, you see a figure on the roadside, motionless, arm extended, thumb pointing to the sky. Against your better judgment, you stop. The figure gets in without a word, their presence unsettling. You drive, and they give you a destination. A place you think you've heard of before. But before you arrive, you realize they've vanished, leaving behind only an eerie silence. Stories like these have persisted for decades, told by bewildered drivers and frightened witnesses. They all describe the same thing: ghostly hitchhikers who appear and disappear under mysterious circumstances. What are these encounters? Paranormal events, urban legends, or something even stranger? The concept of a phantom hitchhiker is as old as the automobile itself. Those stories of ghostly travelers can be traced back to earlier eras of horseback and walking paths. These spectral figures are often described as ordinary people: young women in evening dresses, old men in tattered coats, or even children clutching suitcases. They appear on lonely stretches of road, especially near cemeteries, bridges, or sites of past accidents. Their requests are simple: a ride to a specific destination, often a home or a place of significance. But the moment the driver looks away or reaches their destination, the hitchhiker is gone, leaving no trace of their presence. What makes these tales so unnerving is the universal consistency across different cultures and locations. From the backroads of America to the highways of Europe and the mountain trails of Asia, phantom hitchhikers have become a global phenomenon. One of the most iconic stories is that of Resurrection Mary, a ghost said to haunt Archer Avenue near Chicago. The legend tells of a young woman who died tragically in the 1930s after a night of dancing at the Willowbrook Ballroom. Over the decades, drivers have reported picking up a beautiful young woman dressed in white who asks for a ride to Resurrection Cemetery. But as the car passes the gates, she disappears. Then there's the tale of the ghost of Route 44 in New England, where a man in a plaid shirt is said to appear on the roadside. He's infamous for pounding on car windows, terrifying drivers before vanishing into thin air. Similar tales exist in other parts of the world. In Mexico, La Llorona, the weeping woman, has been reported hitchhiking near rivers, crying out for her lost children. In Japan, Kuchisake Onna, the slit-mouthed woman, appears to lone travelers, asking unsettling questions before revealing her horrifying face. These stories, though varied, all share the same chilling essence: an encounter with the unknown. Phantom hitchhikers are not just random apparitions. Their behavior follows eerie patterns that make these encounters even more unsettling. Many reports describe these figures as eerily calm, speaking only when asked direct questions. They often wear clothing that seems out of place, like evening gowns or outdated suits, as if frozen in time. Some stories tell of hitchhikers delivering cryptic warnings, such as foretelling accidents or natural disasters, before vanishing. Others describe physical evidence left behind: a wet seat where a ghostly figure sat, or an item belonging to someone who had died years earlier. These encounters almost always happen at night, often on desolate roads near cemeteries or locations of past tragedies. The consistency of these accounts is what has fueled belief in their supernatural origins. As with most paranormal phenomena, phantom hitchhikers have sparked debates between skeptics and believers. Skeptics argue that these stories are rooted in urban legends, passed down and altered over time to fit the culture and location. They point to psychological factors like fatigue, stress, or even highway hypnosis, which can cause drivers to hallucinate. Others suggest that the tales are symbolic, representing guilt, loss, or the fear of the unknown. But for those who believe, phantom hitchhikers are spirits trapped between worlds. reliving the moments leading up to their deaths. Some paranormal researchers suggest these ghosts may be residual hauntings, imprints of past events replaying like echoes on a loop. Whether psychological or supernatural, the phenomenon remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the road. Phantom hitchhikers may be the stuff of campfire stories, but their grip on the imagination is undeniable. They represent the thin veil between the living and the dead, a reminder that even the most mundane journeys can take a chilling turn, whether they are figments of tired minds, echoes of past tragedies, or true encounters with the paranormal. Their tales endure, haunting drivers and captivating storytellers alike. So, the next time you're driving down a lonely road and see a figure on the roadside, ask yourself, would you stop? And if you did, would you make it to your destination without glancing at the empty passenger seat beside you?